I'm 33, male, a welder by trade with calloused hands and a back that's seen better days. Growing up, I was the kid who never complained. My parents taught me that family comes first, a lesson I took seriously while my siblings apparently slept through it. I busted my ass for years to get where I am. Straight out of high school, I apprenticed at Morgan Industrial, working double shifts and weekends while community college classmates partied. 6 years of breathing metal dust, burning my arms with slag, and coming home so exhausted I'd fall asleep mid-shower. But I saved every damn penny. No vacations, no fancy car, no bar hopping, just work and more work. By 28, I had enough for a down payment on my house. Nothing spectacular, just 1,800 square feet with decent insulation, a workshop in the garage, and a fig tree in the backyard that somehow survived my mediocre gardening skills. The yard needed work, and the kitchen had countertops straight out of 1982. But the foundation was solid, and the roof was only 5 years old. The day I got the keys, my parents didn't even show up to the closing. Eleanor had a hair appointment, and that apparently took priority. I celebrated alone with a six-pack on my empty living room floor, but I didn't care. The mortgage was manageable, and the place was mine, all mine. 5 years ago, my dad lost his logistics job when the company downsized. My mom's arthritis made her retail work impossible. Her fingers wouldn't cooperate with the register anymore, and she couldn't stand for full shifts. They needed somewhere to stay, just for a few months until they got back on their feet. Being the good son I was raised to be, I didn't hesitate. They raised me, so giving them a roof seemed like basic human decency. What a joke that turned out to be. Those few months stretched into years. Their gratitude evaporated like morning dew, replaced by this weird entitlement that grew like a cancer. No rent, no utilities, no groceries, no contributions to their medications. I covered it all, right down to their streaming subscriptions and premium coffee beans. Dad developed a taste for exotic coffee blends that cost $18 a pound while I still drank the $3.99 store brand. Mom needed special organic cleaning products because regular ones had toxins. I gave them the master bedroom with the attached bath because your father's back can't handle the guest bed. I moved into the smaller second bedroom and used the hall bathroom like a visitor in my own house. If I ever brought up money, Mom would clutch her chest like I'd asked her to donate a kidney. "We're having a hard time," she'd say, reminding me that family supports each other, conveniently forgetting that support shouldn't be a one-way street. Then there were my siblings. Eleanor, 33, female, married, living in a 2-story house her in-laws helped them buy, just 20 minutes away. Her husband, John, worked in finance. Nothing spectacular, just middle management at a regional bank, but they lived well enough. Eleanor had this way of showing up with Starbucks for everyone except me, claiming she didn't know what I liked, despite us growing up in the same house for 18 years. And Derek, my 24-year-old brother, a professional leech who'd moved in temporarily after dropping out of community college for the 3rd time. The kid who never held a job longer than 6 weeks but somehow always had the latest gaming setup. His room looked like a Best Buy showroom. When I asked how he afforded it all, he'd just smirk and say he had a system. I assumed it was credit card debt or some shady side hustle. I had no idea at the time where the money actually came from. Both of them apparently thought I was running a charity hostel. What started as helping family quickly evolved into being straight up used. I just didn't have the balls to call it what it was yet. Over time, small things stacked up. Mom would pull my clothes from the dryer and leave them in a damp pile to dry her socks. Dad monopolized the living room with war documentaries at maximum volume during my work calls. Derek gamed all night, mechanical keyboard clicking like machine gun fire until 4 in the morning. When I asked them to keep it down, Mom muttered, "If you're that sensitive, maybe rent a proper office." This was my house, my mortgage, my rules. Except they weren't my rules anymore. The power dynamic had shifted so gradually I hadn't noticed until it was completely inverted. I had become the tenant in my own home. Eleanor would show up monthly, not to help but to lecture me like she had a PhD in family management. "Nate, you're spoiling them," she'd say, flipping her hair. "You shouldn't keep enabling this behavior." Rich, coming from someone who couldn't be bothered to house her own parents. I always wanted to tell her to take them in herself if she was so concerned, but I never did. Her visits always followed the same pattern. She'd arrive around 10 in the morning on a Saturday when she knew I'd be home. She'd walk through the house, running her finger along surfaces, checking for dust, making little H&M sounds of disapproval. Then she'd corner me in whatever room I tried to hide in. Every time I asked when they might find their own place, Eleanor would turn it around on me. "They raised you for 18 years, and you can't handle a few months? They're struggling, Nate. Where's your compassion? A few months?" It had been 5 years. The invasion was so complete that even my morning routine became a battlefield. I'd get up at 5 in the morning for work, trying to move quietly in the dark. Mom would appear in the hallway, arms crossed, complaining about the noise of me making coffee. Dad would grumble if the bathroom fan woke him up. 3 years in, there was the anniversary dinner incident. I'd been dating someone, Sarah, for about 6 months. We'd planned a nice dinner at home to celebrate. I'd bought steaks, drinks, the works, and told everyone I needed the kitchen and dining room that night. I came home from work to find my dad and Derek sprawled across the living room, watching sports, empty beer cans everywhere. The steaks I'd bought? Gone. My parents had invited Eleanor and her husband over, cooked my food, drank everything, and left the kitchen looking like a frat house after finals week. When I confronted them, my mom actually laughed. "You can have your little date any night. Family dinner was important." I lost it. I started packing their things, told them they had until morning to figure out where they'd go. Cue the waterworks, Mom sobbing about how they'd be homeless, Dad suddenly developing chest pains, Eleanor showing up with John and their 2 kids I rarely saw, all of them looking at me like I was some monster. You'd really throw your own parents onto the street? Over what? What kind of son does that? Derek, that little jerk, just sat there smirking as I gradually backed down. I ended up apologizing to them and ordering pizza for everyone. Sarah never called again after that night, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. My buddy Jared saw through it from day one. We've been friends since high school. He's a plumber, straightforward as they come, with all the tact of a sledgehammer. "Your house is like a parasite convention," he told me one night over beers in my garage, the only space that still felt somewhat mine. "You're being played like a fiddle, man." I laughed it off. What else could I do? Admit that my own family was using me? "Seriously," Jared continued, pointing his beer at me. "Eleanor's house has a guest room. Derek could get a job flipping burgers and find roommates. Your parents could apply for assistance. They choose not to because you're the path of least resistance." Deep down, I knew he was right, but knowing and doing are different animals. The house itself started showing signs of neglect. The garage, once my workshop sanctuary, had become a dumping ground for everyone else's crap. I came home one day to find my welding equipment shoved into a corner, covered with Derek's old textbooks and Eleanor's kids' outgrown clothes. When I tried to clear a space to work, Mom came in and told me I was making too much noise and it was inconsiderate. Inconsiderate. In my own garage, in my own house. But I kept my mouth shut, kept paying the bills, kept working overtime to cover expenses that somehow kept growing, kept believing that things would get better, that they'd remember I was a person too, not just a wallet with legs. They didn't. My breaking point came from a good old-fashioned industrial accident. On a Thursday, we were fabricating support beams when an inexperienced crane operator swung a 2,000-pound steel beam too fast. I tried to get clear, but 12 straight days of overtime had slowed my reflexes. The beam caught my left side, crushing me against a column, 3 broken ribs, a fractured pelvis, internal bruising, and a partially collapsed lung. When I came to in the hospital, the first face I saw wasn't family. It was Jared, who had driven straight from a job site. "Called your parents," he said, uncomfortable. "They said they'd try to come by later if they could find a ride." Find a ride? My car was sitting in their driveway with keys in the kitchen drawer. They had nothing but time, but that was too much effort. Workers' comp covered the medical bills but paid only 70% of my salary, just enough to cover the mortgage and basic bills, with nothing left for extras like feeding 3 adults who contributed nothing. After 5 days in the hospital, they discharged me home with a treatment plan and pain meds. Jared drove me since my family claimed they were too busy to pick me up. The first week at home was bad enough. I could barely move without pain shooting through my entire body. My medications needed to be taken with food on a strict schedule. I'd written down the times, left the notes on the fridge, and asked, practically begged, for someone to remind me if I fell asleep. Nobody did. I missed 2 doses, which sent my pain spiraling out of control. When I asked my mom why she hadn't reminded me, she sighed like I was asking her to perform brain surgery. "I'm not your nurse, Nate. Set an alarm on your phone like everyone else." My phone was on the dresser, 6 excruciating steps from the bed, 6 steps I couldn't take without help. The second week, I ran out of clean clothes. I couldn't carry the laundry basket with my injuries. I asked my dad if he could just throw a load in the washer for me. "I'll get to it when I can," he said, not looking away from his war documentary. 3 days later, I was still wearing the same sweatpants. Jared ended up coming over and doing my laundry for me. "Your family is something else," he muttered, sorting my clothes while I sat on the edge of the bed. "I've seen neglected dogs get better treatment." He looked around the room, noticing the dust buildup, the empty water glasses I couldn't carry to the kitchen, the pill bottles I could barely reach. "This isn't just being lazy. This is borderline elder abuse, except you're not even old. You're just injured and dependent on these assholes." "They're not that bad," I said reflexively, the lie sounding hollow even to my own ears. "My grandma had hospice care that was less attentive than me right now," Jared shot back. "And I'm just your drinking buddy. What does that tell you about the people actually living here?" The third week brought its own special hell. Derek had friends over, loud, obnoxious guys who played video games and complained about women not appreciating nice guys like them. They took over the living room, kitchen, and even started using my bathroom because it was closer. When I asked them to keep it down because the noise was making my head pound, one of them, some bearded dude I'd never met, had the nerve to tell me, "Chill, bro, it's not like you're dying or anything." Derek laughed. My brother laughed at a stranger disrespecting me in my own house. I came home from the hospital barely able to move. The house was in its usual chaos, Mom yelling at the microwave after putting metal inside it again, the kitchen smelling like melted plastic, Dad asleep on the couch with a half-eaten sandwich on his chest, and Platoon blasting so loud the windows rattled. Derek was shouting into his gaming headset, his voice carrying through the entire house. I stood in the doorway, pain medication barely taking the edge off, and asked my mom if she could make me something to eat, just a sandwich, just this once. I physically couldn't reach the kitchen cabinets without excruciating pain. My mom looked up from her phone and said, "We're not your damn servants, Nate." Not with anger, but with this dismissive boredom, like I'd asked her to scrub the toilet with her toothbrush. Dad said nothing, as usual. Derek snickered without looking away from his game. Eleanor, who happened to be there giving her standard lectures, didn't even look up from her phone as she said, "Maybe try meal prepping next time, Nate. Planning ahead is basic adulting." I wish I could say I finally snapped through things or told them all to go to hell, but I didn't. I just stood there, holding onto the wall for support, and said, "All right, that was it." I dragged myself to my bedroom and closed the door. My phone buzzed, Jared checking in. He'd been the one who drove me home from the hospital, who arranged for the prescriptions to be delivered, who actually seemed to give a damn. I texted back that I was fine that night. Something shifted in me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling I'd painted myself when I first moved in, and realized I wasn't just physically broken. I was broken in every way that mattered. I'd given everything to people who saw me as nothing but a resource, a house, a wallet, a servant. I'd become a stranger in the home I'd built, the life I'd created. And for what? For people who couldn't even make me a sandwich when I was injured. I decided then and there, they were gone. All of them. No discussions, no second chances, no negotiations. They had taken enough. Over the next 3 weeks, I focused on healing enough to execute my plan. By week 4, I could move without constant pain. I woke up before anyone else that morning and made coffee, despite the occasional sharp twinge in my ribs. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I felt at peace in my own home, so I made my move. First, I called an attorney, a local guy who specialized in landlord-tenant disputes. He explained that even without a formal lease, my family members were legally tenants. I needed to serve them with proper notice. 30 days is standard, he said, but given there's no rental agreement and they haven't paid anything, we're on solid ground. I'll draft the eviction notice today. He warned me that family evictions are messy, messier than standard tenant issues. They'll use every emotional lever they have, he said. Be prepared for that, and document everything, every conversation, every reaction. If they damage anything, take photos immediately. Next, I called Jared. He came over immediately, helping me move essential paperwork and valuables to a storage unit. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just nodded and asked what else I needed. "You know they're going to lose their collective minds, right?" he said carefully, helping me into his truck. "Eleanor is going to go nuclear. Your mom will probably try to claim elder abuse or something equally ridiculous." "I know," I replied. "I'm done caring." Jared grinned, the first real smile I'd seen in weeks. "About time. Welcome back to the land of self-respect." He pulled into the storage facility. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of you. This won't be pretty, but it's necessary." We moved methodically through my list, bank statements showing all my payments for their expenses, copied and stored off-site, family photos and heirlooms that actually mattered to me, secured important documents, birth certificate, house deed, insurance policies, all safely locked away where temper tantrums couldn't reach them. I changed all my passwords, set up 2-factor authentication on every account, and called the mortgage company and my insurance agent to make sure no one but me could make changes. Small fortifications against the storm I knew was coming. The eviction notices arrived by certified mail the next day, one for my parents, one for Derek. I placed them on the kitchen table where they couldn't be missed, then went to my room and locked the door. The explosion came exactly as expected, Mom wailing like I'd physically attacked her, Dad's heavy footsteps pacing the hallway, Derek pounding on my bedroom door, threatening to screw me up once I came out. Eleanor arrived an hour later, practically kicking in the front door. "You can't do this," she shouted through my bedroom door. "This is emotional abuse, Nate. They have nowhere to go." I texted back, "They can go to your house. You have plenty of space." "That's different," she responded immediately. We have our routines. John wouldn't stand for it. Of course John wouldn't, I replied. Neither would I, if I'd been given a choice. I stayed in my room that night, door locked. Jared brought me food and checked my bandages. My family raged outside like a storm. I could hear them plotting, trying to figure out how to make me back down. I'd expected guilt. I'd expected anger. What I hadn't expected was sabotage. The next morning, I found the kitchen flooded. Someone had stuffed paper towels down the sink and left the water running. The living room furniture had been rearranged to block pathways, difficult for anyone to navigate, nearly impossible for someone with a fractured pelvis and broken ribs. Derek smirked when he saw me struggling. Oops, guess we're all clumsy these days. I said nothing, just took photos of everything, documentation for what was coming. For 2 weeks it escalated. They cranked the heat to 85 degrees during the day, then turned the AC to 60 at night. They accidentally unplugged the internet during my telehealth appointments. They left food to rot in my bedroom when I was out with Jared. Eleanor came over daily, alternating between fake concern and open hostility. This is what happens when you act rashly, she'd say. If you'd just talked to us first, we could have worked something out. Talked? As if I hadn't been trying to discuss boundaries for 5 years. I stuck to a simple strategy: document everything, say nothing. I installed security cameras in the common areas, perfectly legal in my own home, as my attorney confirmed. I set up motion-triggered recording on my phone for when I had to leave my room. Then came the breaking point. I was resting after a particularly painful physical therapy session when I heard glass shattering. I dragged myself to the hallway to find Derek swinging a hammer at the living room wall. Oops, he said, eyes wild with a sick kind of triumph. Guess we're damaging your precious house now. That was it. I called the police and Jared, in that order. The responding officers were professional but clearly annoyed at being called for a family dispute, until they saw my medical condition, the destruction, and the eviction notices. This changes things, one officer said quietly. Destruction of property, harassment of an injured person, violating a legal eviction notice. They gave my family a choice: leave immediately and peacefully or face charges. My parents chose option 1. Derek chose to escalate, screaming about how I was nothing without them, how they made me. He left in handcuffs, charged with destruction of property and threatening behavior. My parents left with their suitcases, Eleanor trailing behind them like a funeral director. You'll regret this, she called back. When you're old and alone, remember this moment. The door closed behind them. The silence was deafening. No war movies, no gaming rage, no passive-aggressive sighs. For the first time in years, my house felt like mine again. Just as I settled back into my recovery routine, my phone buzzed with a message from an unexpected source, my mom's sister, Aunt Nora. We rarely spoke. She lived several states away and only reached out for holidays or emergencies. When I saw her name, my stomach tightened. I opened the message expecting condemnation, but what I read left me stunned. Nate, I just heard what happened. I'm not taking sides, but there's something you need to know. Please call me. It's important. I called her immediately. Nate, she answered on the first ring. Are you all right? As all right as someone can be with broken ribs and no family, I said. About that, she replied. Did you ever wonder how your parents managed financially all these years while living with you? Or how Eleanor afforded that house? I hadn't, actually. I'd assumed Eleanor's husband made good money. As for my parents, I figured they had retirement savings or something. Your grandmother didn't just leave a few mementos when she died, Nora continued. She left nearly $750,000 in assets in cash, to be divided between your mother, Aunt Haley, and you. My mind went blank. What? Yes, Nate. You were entitled to roughly $250,000. No one told you because your mother convinced everyone you weren't responsible enough yet. She and Eleanor were going to manage it for you until you were settled. That was 8 years ago, right before you bought your house. I sat down heavily on my bed, the pain in my ribs suddenly irrelevant compared to this new information. Are you saying they kept my inheritance from me for 13 years? That's exactly what I'm saying, and it gets worse. They didn't just keep it from you, they spent it. They paid off Eleanor's house loan, funded Derek's failed college attempts, covered your parents' debts and early retirement. That's why they never worked after moving in with you. They didn't need to. Everything suddenly made sense. The weird comments about me being unreliable with money, Eleanor mocking me like I needed financial supervision, my parents' complete lack of concern about finding work. Why didn't you say something sooner? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Because I didn't have the full picture until recently, Nora said. Haley finally admitted everything after your mom started twisting what happened with the eviction. And honestly, I was scared of starting a family war. I thought maybe they were helping you financially in other ways. I laughed bitterly. They weren't helping me. I was supporting them while they spent my money. After a long silence, Nora spoke again. I have a copy of the will and a sworn statement from Haley about what really happened. If you want to pursue this legally, we'll back you up. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was working 60-hour weeks, burning my body out to afford a modest house, my own family had been sitting on money that was rightfully mine. Money that could have made my life dramatically easier. My phone pinged with a new email from Eleanor. The subject line was in all caps, "You have no idea what you've done." The message was brief, but revealing, "You act like you've been wronged. The truth is, you're selfish. You've always been that way. Mom and Dad needed that money way more than you did. They gave you life. They were entitled to all of it. All you ever did was complain about them living under your roof. You think kicking them out makes you noble? It makes you pathetic. And if you plan to pursue that nonsense Nora told you about money, remember this. We aren't the only ones with something to lose." I forwarded the email to my lawyer with 4 words, "We have more work." That night, I couldn't sleep, not from the physical pain that was manageable with medication, but from the weight of betrayal. I'd been wrong. This wasn't about family members taking advantage of my generosity. This was theft, and I was going to get what they'd taken from me. The next morning, I called the lawyer Nora recommended, Thomas, who specialized in estate fraud and family financial disputes. We met at his office downtown, and I brought everything. Copies of the will Nora had mailed me, my bank records showing years of payments for their expenses, and all the messages where they hinted I wasn't responsible enough to handle my own money. Thomas raised an eyebrow as he read through the evidence. They were fairly blatant about this, weren't they? They didn't think I'd fight back, I replied. He nodded. That gives us leverage. It turned out my mom and Eleanor hadn't just convinced Aunt Haley to let them handle my share. They'd created a forged document, a letter supposedly from me during my final year of college, saying I'd voluntarily given up my portion of the estate. The signature looked like someone had traced my handwriting from an old birthday card. The language was stiff and formal, using terms I'd never use. The date was during a period when I was working a summer job at a fabrication plant 2 states away. I wasn't even in town when this supposed letter was written. "Do you want to press charges?" Thomas asked quietly. "Forgery, theft, financial deception, these are serious crimes." It was a question I never imagined having to answer about my own family. I thought about the birthdays I'd spent alone while they vacationed in Cancun. The time I missed a medical appointment because they borrowed my car without asking and returned. It empty. Derek's constant disrespect. Eleanor's condescension. My mom refusing to make me food when I physically couldn't move after a serious injury. I looked Thomas straight in the eye. Yes, all of it. The legal process took 8 weeks. Thomas documented everything methodically. Haley provided a sworn statement that the money was meant to be split evenly in thirds, and that she'd been misled about my intentions. Nora shared old family group messages, where my mom and Eleanor discussed handling Nate's portion together. I submitted bank statements showing my support for them, medical reports detailing my injuries, and Eleanor's threatening emails. When Eleanor received the court summons, she cycled through every manipulation tactic in the book, begging, "This will destroy the family, Nate. Anger, you're tearing us apart." Grandma would hate this, and finally silence. My parents tried guilt first, then denial. "We were going to tell you," my mom claimed over the phone. "We were waiting for the right time." The right time? After 13 years and 5 years of living rent-free in my house? The case broke wide open during a deposition when my mom, nervous and defensive, made a critical mistake. When asked about the letter I supposedly wrote, she admitted she had adjusted it slightly to make it sound more official. Thomas pounced on that slip. "So to clarify, Nate didn't write this letter himself?" She tried to backpedal. "Well, he said something like that once, I just formalized it." "So, you wrote the letter?" Thomas pressed. "I improved it," she stammered. That was all he needed. Everything unraveled after that. Bank records showed transfers labeled Nate's portion that went directly to pay off Eleanor's mortgage and fund family vacations. Tax filings revealed early retirement accounts my parents had established using my inheritance. Credit card statements showed Derek's gaming equipment and Eleanor's car being purchased with my money. The court process dragged on longer than expected. I had to take more time off work for depositions and hearings, burning through sick leave I'd accumulated over years. My ribs healed faster than the legal process moved. I returned to work after medical clearance, but with restrictions. The company put me on light duty, monitoring quality control from a desk in the corner of the shop floor. The pay was the same, but watching others do what I used to do stung more than I cared to admit. Meanwhile, the legal case ground on. Eleanor tried claiming the money given to her was a gift from my parents, not my inheritance. My parents insisted they'd plan to pay me back eventually. Derek, when deposed, simply shrugged and said he had no idea where his gaming equipment came from. Mom and Dad bought it was his only answer to everything. The judge was unimpressed by their excuses. The verdict came within a month. My mother, father, and Eleanor were ordered to repay my full share with interest, nearly $300,000. They were also sanctioned for forgery and forced to write formal apologies for the court record. When the ruling came down, I didn't feel the triumph I'd expected, just emptiness, like I'd won a battle in a war that should never have been fought in the first place. 2 weeks after the ruling, they showed up at my house unannounced, all three of them. I was still recovering but able to move around with a cane by then. I opened the door but stayed behind the security chain. Eleanor's face was flushed with that self-righteous anger I knew too well. Dad looked deflated, eyes on the ground. Mom was crying, but they were the kind of tears that appear on command when needed. "You've destroyed this family," Eleanor started, her voice shaking. "I hope you're happy now. What do you want?" I asked flatly. "We came to talk sense into you," she replied. "This lawsuit, taking all that money, it's despicable, Nate, after everything we've done for you." I almost laughed. "Everything you've done? Like stealing my inheritance? Living rent-free in my house for 5 years? Refusing to help when I was injured?" "We gave you life," my mother snapped. "We raised you, and this is how you repay us? By nickel and diming your own family?" Dad finally spoke up. "You need to drop this. Family is more important than money." "That's rich, coming from the people who stole $250,000 from me," I replied. "Where was that sentiment when you were forging documents with my name on them?" "You ungrateful piece of crap," Derek spat, stepping into view behind them. "You think you're better than us? You're nothing." Nothing. I felt a strange calm settle over me. "I need you all to leave now." "We're not going anywhere until you see reason," Eleanor insisted, trying again to push against the door. I held up my phone, showing them the security app with their images clearly displayed on the porch. "I'm recording all of this. You have 30 seconds to get off my property, or I'm calling the police. Your choice." They hesitated, looking at each other. "The court already ruled," I continued. "The money transfers have already begun. Nothing you say now changes anything, except whether you leave with some dignity or in the back of a patrol car." Mom started sobbing louder. Derek kicked one of my porch plants, shattering the pot. Dad just looked tired. Eleanor glared at me one last time. "This isn't over." "Actually it is," I replied and closed the door. I watched through the security feed as they argued on the porch for another minute before finally getting back into the SUV and driving away. The next day, I filed for a restraining order. The judge granted it based on the security footage and Derek's previous destruction of property. They couldn't come within 500 feet of my house or workplace. Eleanor called it excessive in a text message. I called it peace of mind and blocked her number. Word spread quickly through the extended family. Most distanced themselves, not wanting to take sides, but a few reached out unexpectedly. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages of support. One uncle called and said, "I always suspected something was off with that inheritance. Your grandmother would be proud of you for standing up for yourself." That meant more than he could know. Relatives who'd always favored Eleanor and Derek started sending me messages of support. One cousin called and said, "I always wondered how they afforded that lifestyle. Now it makes sense." My parents ended up staying with Eleanor and her husband, John, temporarily. Of course, karma has a sense of humor like that. Within 2 months, John had reached his breaking point. According to mutual friends, he gave Eleanor an ultimatum: her parents leave, or he would. Eleanor chose her parents. John filed for divorce 3 weeks later. No one was particularly surprised when Eleanor lost the house in the divorce settlement. John's parents had put up most of the down payment, and his name was primary on the mortgage. She tried to claim that the money she'd contributed, my money as it turned out, should count toward her equity. But the divorce judge wasn't sympathetic, especially after seeing the copy of our court case. The three of them ended up renting a 2-bedroom apartment together. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. They'd gone from living rent-free in my house to paying market rate for less space. Derek had to get a job at a local warehouse loading trucks. My dad started driving for a rideshare company. My mom found part-time work as a receptionist. All things they could have done years ago but chose not to because I was the easier option. Meanwhile, I was healing, both physically and mentally. The house felt peaceful again. The fig tree was thriving. I converted Derek's old room into a home gym for my physical therapy. I installed smart home features that let me control everything from my phone when movement was difficult. Jared came over regularly, bringing food or just sitting in companionable silence while we watched games. "You know what I like about your place now?" he asked once. "It actually feels like yours." He was right. For the first time in years, I wasn't living in a space occupied by people who saw me as nothing but a resource to exploit. Work improved too. My restrictions were lifted gradually, and I moved back to regular welding duties. The company had installed new safety protocols after my accident, including better training for crane operators. My supervisor offered me a position training new guys with a modest pay bump. I took it without hesitation. 6 months after the court ruling, an email arrived from my parents' new account. The subject line was simple: "We're sorry." The message was brief: "Nate, we know we treated you terribly. We took advantage of your kindness and betrayed your trust. We're truly sorry for everything we did. We hope someday things can be fixed between us. We miss you, Mom and Dad." I clicked delete without responding. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. The money eventually came, transferred directly to my account per the court order. I used part of it to complete the house renovations I'd been putting off for years: new insulation in the attic, a water heater that didn't sound like a jet engine, windows that actually kept heat in during winter. The rest went into investments, index funds, retirement accounts, even a small rental property a few towns over. Things that would build wealth slowly but steadily. I took one small indulgence: a decent motorcycle, nothing flashy, just reliable, something that was entirely mine, that no one else had keys to or claims on. On Sundays I'd ride up into the hills, feeling the engine rumble beneath me and the wind against my face, freedom in its purest form. There were still hard moments. Holidays came and went without family gatherings. I got invited to co-workers' Thanksgiving dinners and Christmas parties, accepted sometimes, declined others, made new traditions that didn't involve pretending harmony where none existed. Sometimes I think about how differently things might have gone if they'd just been honest from the beginning, if they'd treated me with basic respect, if they'd seen me as a son rather than a safety net. But those thoughts don't keep me up at night anymore. The pain has faded. Most importantly, I learned that family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect, by mutual support. Jared stopped by last week with takeout. "You've been living like a monk," he said, dropping a bag of burgers on the coffee table. "Time to get back out there." Maybe he's right. Maybe it is time to build something new. After all, the house is finally mine again. And this time, I'm keeping it that way.